Hi, this is Graham Brown and welcome to the Excel Podcast. The Excel Podcast is a platform for the bigger conversations about leadership in the 2020s. Who's leading, how are they leading, and what stories do they have to share? Through the stories of leaders, we'll address the big challenges of our times, from the era of AI to the Asian century to nurturing a new generation of entrepreneurs. If you're enjoying these conversations, subscribe to the podcast at excelpodcast.org. Hey everybody, this is the Excel Podcast. Welcome to a new episode. My name is Graham Brown. Now, Excel is all about leadership, and that comes in many different forms. It's what is leadership, but also how is the world for leaders changing? A big part of that is obviously work. How is the world of work changing for leaders? Everything from working in remote teams to how do I, as a leader, be a better leader? All the way down to, how do I find the kind of work that I really want to do? These are the kind of questions people are asking now. There's a lot of change, as you know, in the last couple of years. We've been disrupted. There's a lot of transformation. Things are happening at speed, so it's easy to get left behind. So we need people to help us understand what's going on in the world of leadership and people, importantly, whether that's leading people, managing people, or hiring people. It all comes down to people at the end of the day. So let's bring in an expert in the world of people. I'm joined by Lorraine Chang from Ascension Associates. Lorraine, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks for having me.
Joining us from Hong Kong. You're Hong Kong born and bred. What's the story there?
Yep, Hong Kong is through and through. Surprise quite a number of people whenever I meet new guys. I don't know why.
We like surprises.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
I know your background. Part of what you do, a big part of what you do is headhunting, but it's not all of what you do. How would you describe yourself if I was to ask you that cocktail party question?
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you describe yourself?
Oh, nowadays I'm just like straight into that 20 seconds opener. Oh, I'm a 3-in-1. I'm a facilitator, coach, and a headhunter. So I do 3 things all at the same time.
It's interesting, isn't it? That world of hiring and headhunting has kind of evolved, that you're not just placing people anymore. We'll talk about this. Obviously, the skills that you need mean that not only are you placing people, you're almost having to coach people and also potential hirers as well, like advising them on strategy when it comes to hiring, because it's no longer simply putting, as they say in the old world, bums on seats. Now you have to think about what actually people want, strategy, skills even as well. So all of that's changing. And it seems that with that, the headhunters have to evolve as well. So maybe we can talk, Lorraine, about some of the trends at the moment that are happening from your perspective, from your vantage point, based in Hong Kong, but you see across a very wide region, all of Asia and beyond as well. So people are moving. I'll give you an example. I have friends just this week. One is moving from Hong Kong to Dubai, a country manager, and then one is moving from Dubai to Singapore. So I'm waiting for another one to move from Singapore to Dubai to Hong Kong to make the full circuit. There's a lot of movement right now. There seems to be, 3-4 years ago, people wouldn't be making these decisions. It seems like the inertia has gone. People are asking different kind of questions. What are you seeing? What kind of conversations are happening right now with top level talent?
At the top level talent, I have to kind of like be specific in here because I don't work with all sorts of industries in the entire world. So I particularly focus quite a lot on financial services, in particular actually with insurance. A lot of actually top level talents these days, they still want upward mobility. They still want to have a job that could actually give them more purpose, that actually they come in to make an impact and not just, another like paycheck. Of course, everybody wants an upside, but, they want something that is a little bit more, tangible in terms of the purpose and, what's the real reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, kind of in response to your, people moving around, and people have been moving around for years. But it's just that, nowadays, after like probably like 2 years of COVID, people are a bit more, let's just like go out there and try something new. And just not get bogged down by all these travel restrictions and virus and whatever. But the moving around has been happening, and it's happening like you notice more frequent than before. I have seen quite a number of cross-country transfers, and these top-level talent, they don't want to be just restricted by one location. Some of them are very mobile. Some of them, can be just working in Vietnam. Next day they'll be in Indonesia. Next day they're going to be in Hong Kong. Next day they're going to be in Dubai. So, there's a lot of movements. And if you're talking about technical people, in particular, for example, in insurance, we talk about actuaries, any people right now, like the data scientists and the data analytics folks, if they are really good with numbers, they can move to US, they can move to UK whenever there's an opportunity. As long as they are good with it, as long as their family allow for it, they will go for it. The last thing that I want to mention is some of the top level people that I've been dealing with, they want to see more real things getting done rather than, just going into another organization where there's just a lot of talk and press conferences and, shows and whatever, but never get really, real progress. So that's a change.
They're a lot fussier now. When did that change happen? Was it COVID that has really sped up that change? Was it always there? Was it ongoing? At what point could you say, if you look back over the last 10 years, can you say at this point, these things really started to matter? Because, purpose, I imagine for an actuary, purpose wasn't really high on the agenda, was it, until recently? So at what point did that happen? All respect to actuaries, by the way. But I'm just saying,
we're respecting them. We're just respecting them. You're absolutely right. I mean, some of them, they still doing what they're doing. But, not all of them are like that right now. I would say from my own observation, it's just, again, my own observations, because respecting there are, other headhunters out there who've been doing this longer than I do. The change that I started to see was around actually 4 or 5 years ago, right about when I was going to go out there and set up on my own. Because the thing is, with these industries that have been highly regulated by government, by regulatory bodies, and they are strategic industries of our nations. Kind of like the national power, right? Finance and everything. They have been kind of really just sit back and observe all the changes and be really resisting to change for a lot of them. But, the millennial demand, the millennials customers' experience and their expectation, and essentially, our generation and the people younger than me, who put a lot more emphasis on purpose, on ESG, on the social responsibility of these corporates, slowly have actually made an impact on these giants, so to speak. Because in the old days, they really don't need to change. I mean, when was the last time you expect insurance company to change their entire operations, right? I mean, you just renew your policy and then it just being the same old. But right now, people are buying differently and things just happen differently as well. You have different sort of accidents. For example, COVID, it's something that a lot of insurers never expected. So how are you going to balance the profits and actually, all the claims, right? And also be responsible and kind of answering your customers' demands. One of the conversations I had recently, we are dealing with customers who were born in this century. It's just kind of the biggest change already, right? I mean, if you're born in 2000, you're right about kind of leaving college by now. Right? So, how they expect their employers to behave and how they expect their peers to behave, it's just an entire kind of paradigm shift from before. I don't like to use the word paradigm shift, but that is what it is right now.
You've used it. Yeah. But it is a shift.
It is. Yeah.
How do they express that though? Do they come to you and say, yes, I want a good job, but I want to do meaningful work? Are these the words that they use? Do they say purpose? Do they say ESG? Because I imagine hirers, talent managers, leaders of the hirers would know this, but does the talent, the people you deal with, actually express it in that way? Or how do they talk about these things? Because they're sort of soft aspects of hiring and headhunting, aren't they? Which you don't necessarily fill a box with. How does that manifest?
A lot of my candidates now, although that I focus more on the senior level people now, it doesn't mean that I'm not aware of the fact that, the younger folks these days, they would actually do a lot of research online and, kind of like in between, within their peers on actually how the company is doing on different aspects. When you're talking about ESG, then the DEI also comes into place, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. How are they doing as an employer to include, certain communities? Are they really doing what they're doing? Am I seeing what they posted on social media really in line with actually what they do in reality? Now, there's interesting observation. There are two kind of like almost two camps sometimes. And there are people out there who say, you know what, even though that I'm young, I don't really care. I just need a paycheck. But then you have more younger people who care about these things and they want employees to be accountable. And there are some of them who are like, you know what, I get it. This is corporate. They just actually, take some pictures, post it on social media, and that's it. They're not really doing the real deal. But then there are people out there who say, no, you know what, I would rather to work for a company that really like walk the talk. So the walk the talk demand has increased more than before. So, you have companies out there who actually like take an extra mile and say, let me go hire someone with disability. And for real, put them in meaningful positions, not just ask them to do something like kind of like a minute kind of work, So, and when you say, do I have people coming to say meaningful? Yes, I've been hearing this actually for 10 years. Across actually many different industries, across actually not just the technical positions. There are people out there who will say, I've been doing this for 3 years and I don't really see the point of doing it. Actually, sometimes even for actuaries, because they'd be like, there are a million different ways to calculate things. Do we need to actually go into that deep? Are we actually doing the work that really like mean, what does it mean for the entire company? And then you will see these people kind of like drifted and leave eventually.
Do you think they're making economic decisions about that? So, let's do it in US dollar terms, for example. Let's say I'm earning, maybe 200,000 a year in this role.
Yeah.
And there's this company which has much better track record with DE&I, ESG, but the pay's less. Let's say it's 150,000, which is not a lot for an actuary, to be honest. But let's just say, would they make an economic decision about that? Or is it negotiable? Or is it, I would never go to a company that didn't have these values and this purpose?
I wouldn't necessarily say that extreme. But, people out there, they will still make the decision based on, the number one, the room for career growth, the boss they'll be working with, the pay. But on top of that, they're also asking for more. Is this company aligning with the values that I treasure? Now, again, not everyone is like that, but there is an increasing group of people who want to have that. And another thing is actually not just about the ESG or the DEI, that's just part of it. The biggest change is actually people, they want to be satisfied in terms of learning and growing much faster than before. So that's why some of my clients and say, oh my God, actually, all these young people, they are hopping jobs real quick. And this is actually not in 2022. This has been happening for many years. But with the younger generation, it seems that the rate has actually gone much quicker. It's just gone up. So what are we doing to deal with it? Now, again, there's always outliers. I have a friend of mine who's same age as me. Guess actually how long has been she staying with her current company?
Surprise me.
10 years.
Yeah, that's an outlier.
My age, 10 years. But what has made her stay in the company It's because she has been constantly promoted and move around and do different things. So what I've seen is that if you actually want to retain somebody, it's the same old thing. Do you give them room to grow? Do you actually give them something valuable to do? And, is it kind of like in line with actually what they want out of their career? All I'm saying is the career conversations have gone different from before. Now, in the past, it's like that performance appraisal. You remember Graham, right? Once a year, performance appraisal, and that's it. But right now, it's ongoing conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's harder now to gamify or cheat this reward or, career progression for employees. If you go back some years, Lorraine, if you think about, there was a lot of talk about gamifying careers or salary or the whole progression. And you would have employers create these environments for their people where, you'd have the ball pit, you have free beer, it would be a cool office, and games, you have the football table and stuff like that, because that's what they thought would make people happy at work. But
no,
what you're saying is exactly, there's the meaning part, is actually people are seeking out meaning and development, personal development. Like, will this be a place that I can grow? And will the people I work with support me in this as well? And that you can't cheat. You can't fake that. That comes out, doesn't it? That's the DNA of the organization. And no matter how much of a spin you put on it, that's who people really are. So I think this is where we are right now, is that people can actually see this and make decisions about these organizations and cultures and see them for what they really are.
Yeah, because, if you are not paying people on time, if you are giving me all these ping pong balls and everything, but then the next day you announce like a massive redundancy without any kind of previous warning, that's just not going anywhere. And plus, even if you give me a ping pong table, do you really allow your staff to play with it? That's another thing, right?
Only on recruitment days, maybe.
Right? So I think what you're saying is like so spot on, Graham, because basically the thing is the fact that you have beer days, you have happy hours, you have the ping pong, whatever, is to create the environment where people can relax, can mingle, and they can bounce off ideas outside of their desk, which is actually really good for your physical well-being. Now that we are in COVID, we're working from home, now that we miss, you know what? Actually, taking a walk is really, really good. A simple thing can do wonders for our brain. It was exactly for that purpose. But if you think that, that's just simple, right? I mean, I put on something fancy out there, gamification, whatever, give you like ping pong and beer and whatever, free beer, and that would help me to engage the young folks. No, because you can have it anywhere you want. And it's not that expensive either. But it's about actually what goes behind giving out these free perks. What do you do? And people can feel your motivation and your purpose. And I remember, like a few months ago, I was working on this head of HR search, and I asked the candidates, what is kind of motivating you to come talk to me if you are happy with where you are? Because, in my experience, if you're completely happy where you are, you wouldn't even pick up my phone. You wouldn't even respond to my messages. And she's like, oh my God, you're the first headhunter to have ever asked me motivation. And I'm like, seriously?
Really?
Really?
I would have thought that would have been high. Why don't they ask that?
I don't know. I don't know. And I'm like, can you ask the headhunters you worked with before and ask them, why don't they ask you this? I'll be interested to know. Right. But the thing is, it's about that, going back to almost the really good, boring academic stuff, but it still works. And the kind of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Yeah. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this for a show? Or are you doing this really because you want to, care about employee well-being? And one thing, probably before we go cover the topics, is I think the biggest point, the problem is, and I have empathy with all these decision makers, because I see that a lot of these decision makers, they're still like baby boomers or maybe Gen X. They really grow up in a different socioeconomic and cultural context from where we are. Getting satisfaction in terms of the job and economic satisfaction was really simple for them. right? You get a big paycheck, you get a big bonus, you buy a big house, buy nice cars. Anywhere in Asia, you're good. You are deemed successful. But right now, for my generation and people younger than me, and because actually I'm starting to work with a lot more younger people on my own team as well, I see that, it's not that they don't care about the paycheck. It's not that they don't care about your working environment, but they really want to know why you're doing this. That simple question, going back to the purpose thing. And it's more about the self-actualization sometimes. And then when I'm trying to get this across to the hirer in some of the older generations, they can't really get it yet. That's why you see why they're doing all these gamifications and, like putting out free beer pong. They thought they have done it. Tick the box. But they don't really get what's actually driving us behind. So that's the thing. And another thing is sometimes when people hear all these like free perks and, like really groovy working culture, especially from American tech firms, they only take that surface part without really understanding the entire systematic structure and the build out of it. For example, I was sharing with this leadership principle over my well-being webinars earlier this year. Why do we see the traditional American tech firms even offer you washing machine and got you, like space to do yoga whenever you want to? It's because, they really need you to work on a lot of like squeezing out of your brain juice projects and innovations and whatever, and research. And, we are human beings, we can only stay focused, laser focused for a certain amount of time during a day. And afterwards, you do need to get some rest. That's why they let you to do it. That's why they're like, this is good for the company. I'll let you do whatever you do. And then you come back. The engineers, you can come back and work on your own thing. So for the other side of the hires, what I see is they didn't understand this part. They didn't understand why they're doing this. So that's why they either reject the idea totally, or they just like, oh, Graham, this is another yoga class. This is another well-being webinar. This is going to be good for you. And then you'll be like, if you kind of like take it out of the context, this is the thing. If you take it out of the context, you are not doing any good for your employees. Actually, you're doing harm.
Yeah, very insightful. We've talked about the decision makers, the hirers, who maybe there's some generational challenges there as well, the ones that don't get it, but obviously there are ones that do get it as well, and an increasing number as I suppose younger people move up into those positions as well. Yeah. Let's talk about the decisions on the other side, which are as important. That's the decisions made by the hired, the headhunted. There's a lot going on there, which as well, we're having to adapt, we're having to evolve. You talk about, for example, the decision-making for hiring for the hirer was very simple for generations. It was offer a good package, salary, stable job, perks, insurance, etc. And yet now for the hired, there is a change. So many of them probably are still approaching the process as they would have done years ago. So if you're a top level talent and you're interested in moving, you're interested in swapping up, moving to a company with more purpose or something that makes you feel more rewarded or a higher salary, whatever it may be, whatever your goals are, your motivations. It's no use simply doing what we used to do 10, 20 years ago in the job search. So we need to know what's changed. And maybe we can talk about what's the old-fashioned way of doing the job search from the talent side. Traditionally, what would they do? And then why that doesn't work anymore?
Yeah, this is a very good question because, and I shared this in my own videos recently as well. A lot of candidates, they come to me and ask me, I was applying jobs on social media platforms. I was applying jobs on different job search sites. And I got no results. It's been very poor. And then the obvious answer is because you are just one of the out of the many in the entire pool. So how do you stand out in such a crowded place, especially for regular corporate functions like, HR and marketing and IT? Because if you are a technical person, like, actuary for insurance companies, engineer for, a power plant, that's a different story, right? But if you're just like, you are in a regular corporate function, then you're just like any other person in another industry, you're competing with them. So a lot of these folks, what I see is that when they reach to a certain level, they are still using the same mentality and approach when they were searching 10 years ago or 20 years ago when they were younger. So in one side, they know that their mindset have to be changed and have to be adapted to the latest technological changes and hiring practices, whatever. They're willing to adapt. They're willing to use it, for example. But when it comes to their own job search, interestingly, they're still using the same old method. So obviously, you're not going to get any results because, the world has changed and you're still using the way that you used to do things 10 years ago. Now, one of the reasons why they're doing this is a lot of them, very common reason is they've been staying in the company for too long. That's very obvious because they don't need to find a job. The second is some of these people, when they change jobs, is mostly by referral. So they got a job because they know someone else. The previous boss asked them to join them. So they don't even need to go search on their own. So when you ask them to build something on their own, they're like clueless. They don't know what to do.
No experience.
They're like, no experience. They're just like casting out a wide net. But then, these days is about being focused and being niche and understanding what you can bring to the table and what you cannot bring to the table.
Just before you talk about what is that, what would they do? Would they write their CV resume, then contact 100 people on LinkedIn, send it to them, wait for a response? Is that what the old approach would have been, or is it different?
Yeah, it would have been that way. And then I still constantly receive random messages and connection requests out of nowhere and say, oh, I want to change. I want to move to another country. And then I'll be like, okay, so what is your credentials? What is your background? What's your experience? What makes other people want to hire you in the first place? And just because you have 20 years under your belt doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything, because there are 100 people out there who also have 20 years under the belt and who might have actually bigger exposure. So what makes you special? So a lot of the people, they forgot to kind of like pave their own way. The phrase that comes to my mind is they actually don't know. And Graham, this might actually surprise you. They actually don't know how to manage the career move by design. They are managing their entire career by default. Oh, I got made redundant. Oh, I got a new boss I don't like. Oh, I didn't get the promotion. Let me go find 100 headhunters and find me the next whatever old job that I want to get. And then I'll be like, well, you're looking for C-suite kind of role. How many C-suite are going to be out there? You kind of like, you got to actually be strategic about the whole thing. You're not hiring, you're not looking for another like manager level position. So this is actually the problem. A lot of the people, they're just waiting for things to happen. Corporate headhunters, if Lorraine doesn't have anything, call another one. Oh, I bet, if I call 5 or 6, down the line, I'm going to get something. But really, in these days, is this something that is really kind of like coming your way? Is it something that's really like by you? Is it really good platform? Is it really good choice? So I see that a lot of people, they were climbing uphill from 20, 22 to like 35, and then they reach a plateau and they just stayed there and even go downhill. They either work for smaller and smaller corporates of, let's say, tier 3, tier 4, no longer the tier 1, tier 2 that they worked for before, or they just are not really learning anything new in their current role. They might have a very big title, very big paycheck, but if you drill deep and if you ask anyone in the industry, they would know that actually the job duties is actually not that amazing. So how can you actually enhance your hiring ability, right, in terms of other people's eyes? Because when you reach certain level of salary, you need to manage people's perception. That's why you need to manage your entire career move by design and not by default. And then some of the things is that actually, if you don't want to climb up the ladder to use the metaphor used by, Sheryl Sandberg, you're climbing the jungle gym. You can go horizontal. You don't need to go by vertical. And I always like to ask my candidates, hey, if you actually cannot get that top job in your organization, what's next for you? And then you'll be surprised. 9 out of 10, they cannot answer me. Oh, I'll just find another organization then. And but what if actually they're all healthy, they're not moving anywhere? What are you going to do if you really want to be where you want to be? Never thought about it.
This is what they've successfully applied in the past, though, by default, isn't it? Because they bumped into something else, or they got a call, the ex-boss has moved to another company.
Exactly.
I need you to, by default, isn't it? You're relying on the inbound. I like this idea of by design. It's a conscious decision, isn't it? And you're talking about managing perceptions, which I guess if you're a talented and successful careerist, and you've got the experience and you've reached your way to that top of that hill, managing perceptions might be an interesting challenge, because you might be good at everything apart from that. You might not have had to do that ever. It's almost like I'm having to sell myself, or I'm having to brand myself. Exactly. Normally my companies speak for themselves, or, my PhD, my MBA, Stanford, these speak for themselves. Now I've got to talk in different terms. What is this about? What is by design, and what is the managing perception part?
By design meaning it doesn't have to be, this is the exact steps that I need to take if I want to get the top job. Because we know nowadays, even if I design the entire menu SOP, you might need to just throw it down the toilet for other reasons, right? Just looking at what happened to us for the last 3 to 4 years. But what I mean by design is at least be conscious every year within themselves what they have actually achieved or learned comparing from last year. And if they want to get to top job, or just stay the same or stay competitive, right? Because when we talk about career development here, it's very interesting. Not everybody needs to be the CEO or C-1. They can be the most, they can be the best senior manager or whatever that is, one level below department head, and they can be successful. That's fine. But it doesn't mean that they don't need to learn anything new, or kind of unlearn something that I've done in the past. Now, by design is meaning be conscious. And thank you, Graham, for using the word conscious. By actually being aware of what you need to unlearn, what you need to relearn, and what you need to learn if you want to stay in your current industry, in your current job function. And what if actually one day that somehow you want to leave your current industry and current organization, want to do something new? What is it that you want to do right now that can get you prepared? Now, by design, I like to use the metaphor of Olympic athletes. Well, of course, everybody knows, right? I mean, you cannot guarantee that you're going to get a gold medal, but you're going to be designing actually your own exercising routine. You're going to be fine-tuning your diet and everything, so that you can actually stay the best shape and your top form when you go into the arena, right? That's what I mean by design. You don't just go out there and wing it and say, I got this perfect badge on my CV, right? I work for this Fortune 500. It speaks for itself. Everybody should come hire me. No, it doesn't work that anymore. Because what works for this organization doesn't work for another one, for sure, these days. And people need to be very mindful of the fact that nowadays, for example, I can use the neighbor that I'm having right now across my room. You guys also have Oatly, the oat milk in Singapore, right?
Yeah.
Guess how many people in Oatly Hong Kong office? Now, shut up, man. Of course they have someone. Come on. Now, they came from Sweden to Hong Kong 4 years ago, right? Around 4 people. 4 years onwards, they are in Starbucks. They are in Pacific Coffee. I know bakery shop, they're using the oat milk to make all the bread and cakes and whatever. Still 6 or 7 people.
Wow.
Basically, they are the marketers. They are the designers. They are the partnership. They are the sales. an office of 6 to 7 people can talk to big corporates. Now, a lot of my traditional corporate candidates and clients, they still don't understand because, especially financial services, it's been very precise. And, you have basically someone to do just one job, right? But the world is changing. You have people that can actually wear many hats. And guess what? They're not asking for astronomical amount of money. So when you reach that level, are you that capable? Are you that competitive? What value can you add that these people cannot give, right? A lot of these people, a lot of my senior candidates, they're still not being aware of it. They just think like, you know what, Graham, I got 25 years on my CV. I work for this big corp, A, B, C, and D. I should be there. My perfect example is one of my candidates, no kidding. 3 months in the job, he's like, this is not something that I need to do. I'm very senior. This is something actually like 2 piecemeal for me. Why am I actually need to talk to all these local countries, working with them on projects? And then I'm like, no, the more senior you are, the more humble you have to be.
Yeah, that's difficult. That's the unlearning part, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've heard people say, I've sat with people in business and they said, I didn't do an MBA to talk to customers. I'm like, wow, that kind of mindset, it's part of the system, isn't it? But that's why you need somebody to poke you, to pull you, to push you a little bit in the skills department, to coach you in a way and say, look, that's not how it works anymore. The best leaders are out there walking the floor. They're talking to people, they're leading by example, they're getting insights. That's what it is to be a leader now. And I love this idea of being aware of the learning as well, that you talk about Oatly as an example. I'm sure that's a huge learning experience for those guys. The kind of things you'd learn with multiple hats, if you like. You'd learn everything about a business and how rewarding and challenging that would be as well. And it's easy to measure salary. It's easy to measure a title. It's easy to measure the size of the budget you control, which in many ways were measures of success, weren't they? That was a mark of how well you've done. But it's hard to measure learning because it kind of was a thing that happened as a byproduct of all of that. But now what you're saying is you've got to put that front and center and be aware of it, both for the hired and the hirers as well, because that is actually, whilst you might not be able to measure it in zeros and ones, like you say, if you look at it year by year, you can measure progression for sure. And then, going back to this athlete example, like the Olympics, these guys, they train 4 to 6 years in cycles, right? They're thinking that far ahead. I'm training 4 years. It's all planned out. And they're mapping it out and they're thinking about, I need to get to this stage, this stage, this stage. It doesn't happen by default, for sure. It's very much by design. It's, I guess, it's challenging. That's the challenge is there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to take on board, and it can be very overwhelming and confusing for people in this space. And obviously that's why we need people like you to guide them as well in this process, not just headhunting, but you're also coaching and advising these people on what to do best. I really want to, I'm conscious of the time. There's a question I want to ask you about women and leadership and hiring and being hired as well. I'm curious, is this particularly a challenge for women? Because we all know there aren't enough women in leadership roles. And it's a lot easier for a man to stand up on stage and, personal branding comes a lot easier because, when they grow up, they're less likely to be criticized. I'm allowed to sort of play with the sharp objects, if you like. But for women, it's a lot harder. I'm not saying it should be, but that's how it is. So what's your observation of women candidates as well when it comes to, the top levels? Do they find it harder to do this? Do they find it harder to manage perceptions? Or do they naturally find this easier than men?
That's an interesting question. And my answer might surprise a lot of people. I haven't come across any women telling me that they find it hard to climb to the top. But I can share with you, a lot of them, they still have certain level of insecurity or impressions about how they should behave as a senior corporate executive. Again, it goes back to the generational differences and the expectations and everything. And I know that for a certain level of senior women executives, depending on their age group, they might be very scared of what might comes next, when they get older, right? Because they have worked so hard to climb to the top. So, what if, they cannot take it any longer because of the physical demands, right? At one point, both men and women, we're going to go into menopause, right? So what's going to happen? So there is still this kind of like fear of uncertainty because I haven't experienced it yet. And it comes with very personal conversations. But not every single woman is going to be, super anxious about this. What I see is actually a lot more women out there. They are being more outspoken and they are being more assertive and building really meaningful communities so that actually they can help each other to climb to the top, to overcome any imposter syndrome, talk about personal branding. There are a lot more workshops out there. Over here in Hong Kong, we have, like women in financial services, women in financial associations. We have like women of Hong Kong communities that just support one another. And the bonding and the energy is just amazing. So there are a lot more people out there who are sort of coming forward and saying, hey, we can also do this. And also there are more male allies right now. And like I wrote on LinkedIn a few months ago, I think in 3 years' time, the conversation should be stopped at female leaders or male allies. It should be just leader and allies.
Yeah. We know when we get to that point, we've done it. But until that point, we still need to talk about it. We're not quite there yet, are we? That's especially generational as well. I imagine, as they become more successful and the older they are, these become more of an issue as well. That, the generational perceptions of women in positions of power or leadership are different. That's changing for the better, obviously. But it's not just women, men as well, and across all generations. And that's why we need to have these conversations, open conversations, Lorraine, which hopefully today was, and very frank and helpful as well. I'm sure people will be thinking after listening to this is that they will want to message you on LinkedIn and say, Lorraine, I want to change, rather than let's have that, let's kind of help themselves a little bit here.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking, I'm in this position, firstly, at what point should I be thinking or having this conversation first? Because, maybe I'm not ready yet. Is there a point at which I'm ready to have this conversation with you? Is it the point when I've had enough? Or is it the point where I'm just having an idea about, maybe something different? When is that a good point? And then also when I get to that point, how do I start that conversation? What do I do? Do I send a CV or do I, pick up the phone? What are the best steps? So let's talk about at what point should I, as a candidate, as somebody who wants to change, start having the conversation?
I would say the number one thing is this person has to believe in self-investment. First and foremost, self-investment. Not just, what is the next Bitcoin to buy, right? Not just which, not just like which is the next property market to invest in, but, investing in yourself. Because the number one successful trait that I see in all my senior leaders, whether it's a hire or the candidate, is they invest in a lot in themselves. Number one. Number two, they have to realize that they want to change and have the will to change. Because if the will is not there, there's nothing that can be done, right? If you have no will and there's no skill, that's just like, I'm not there for you yet, right? So you gotta have some will, but if you kind of like figure it out, you just go back to skill will matrix, right? If you have a high will and no skill, I can help you. If you have a high will and high skill, I can also help you. That's actually when coaching comes in. But you have no will and no skill, that's something very tricky.
Yeah. Good. That's helpful to know. That will pre-qualify. That will scare off a few people, but that's what you want, isn't it? Not everybody values the investment. And we all know this. I mean, especially the older you become, the more you realize, I wish I had invested more in myself when I was younger. Yeah. But obviously, that's wisdom, isn't it? So that self-investment and understanding that this is part of the journey, not just finding the next job, but the whole process, investing in yourself, managing the perceptions, building your career by design as well, which, you're not doing it for the next year or two. You're doing it for a lifetime, effectively. So you're there to help. Where do people reach out to you, and what are the best circumstances in which you can help people? So let's talk about where people can find you first, Lorraine. Where do I go?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn for sure. And then we're launching something big in 2 weeks. So they can start subscribing to our insights articles and watch our pre-workshop preparation videos, and come to our monthly workshops where the first one is exactly on actually managing your career move by design, not by default. So we're going to talk about differences between, let's say, Hong Kong dollars 1.5 million basic salary and Hong Kong dollars 3 million basic salary. What's the difference in that? And what's the difference between someone making a Hong Kong dollars 3 million technical as subject matter expert and a C-suite? What are the differences? What should people be looking for? And how should they be prepared so they can have choices? Because the key here is choices. They can then also kind of subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are uploading our new videos. So we've just finished revamping and adding some of the English subtitles to our Cantonese videos. Some of them are in English already, so I'm not worried about it. But for the Cantonese speaking videos, because we have regional fans who don't speak my language, so I'm adding back the English subtitles. They can go there. They just need to stay tuned. It's not that difficult to find me, but it's, again, making that decision of, what they actually want out of their life. And are they actually willing to commit? Yeah,
I think if somebody's there, then the best action point for them is to reach out to you, or at least find out what you're doing in terms of workshops and content out there. That's a good, I know you write a lot as well. You put a lot of content out there, the videos as well. Find out a bit more about you, and then just reach out, start that process, start that conversation. And you're very generous with your time as well. You're happy to help people and at least point them in the right direction, even if they're not ready yet, or maybe it's not the right time for them yet, or because that process may be a long process for them, right? They may not be wanting to move right here, right now, but they may be on that journey, and it may be happening months, maybe even next year. So, but that process needs to start. So reach out to Lorraine and tell her that you heard this conversation as well. Lorraine, really nice speaking to you. Let's give them the website address before you go. We'll put it in the show notes anyway, but for those who are listening only, maybe they want to look you up through that. Do you want to give a shout out to the website? I know they can find you on LinkedIn, obviously, but website as well?
Sure. AscensionAssociates.com with a hyphen in between Ascension and Associates. Simple.
Excellent. Or Lorraine Chang. On LinkedIn as well. Lorraine, very nice speaking to you, and very insightful as well. Really interested to hear your thoughts as well about how that market is changing, and also what people need to do about themselves. It's great, actually, because I think people just kind of get stuck in what has worked for the last 10 years, 20 years. And even though we're very aware of change around us, actually changing ourselves is probably the hardest part. But today, hopefully, was a bit of inspiration as well. And hopefully, as you are out there more talking about hiring and talking about leadership and talking about skills and, managing those perceptions, people will learn a bit more about you as well. So it'd be great to be, on that journey with you and sort of discover as you're growing as well, and learn a little bit about how you got into this space as well. So I'm sure people are interested in that. So stay tuned for more from Lorraine. Lorraine, thank you very much today.
Sure, Graham, you were the best.
You've been listening to the XL Podcast with me, Graham Brown. To subscribe and discover more conversations, go to www.xlpodcast.org.